Welcome to the Bigger Room podcast. I'm your host, Mel Cobian.
And I'm Jill Bender, and today we want to talk about true stories. It's going to be a mixture of true crime, and one of the stories, it may be based loosely on books, folktale, and some book stories, but thought that would be a fun way to end our Halloween month. So we're going to get into it first with the story of a clown.
Story of a clown.
Story of a clown. Pennywise, to be specific. So it was basically the real life Pennywise. I believe this was in the 50s. We're just going to say it was a time when clowns were just happy, party, friendly, make kids smile and laugh characters and not horror film features. But there was a particular clown that dressed up pretty close to what the modern day Pennywise looked like. He had the same like eerie big smile on his face, and the makeup was very close. And he lived in this town where he was very well known as an entertainer, and he would, people would have him come to birthday parties and even adult parties, just to have some entertainment there. And but then people started noticing that young boys were going missing, and they were getting scared and they didn't know what was going on. So one day, there's a young man who was passing through, and his car broke down, and this guy who dressed up as the clown, we're gonna just call him John because I don't actually know what his name was, but we think we're on the same story, right? All right, so John said, "Hey, it's late. You're not going to get anybody to help you right now, so I have an extra bed at my house. Why don't you just crash there?" The young man was very hesitant, declined the offer at first, and the guy's like, "Well, are you going to sleep outside all night? Like, I have a bed. There's nobody there. Come stay, you're welcome to stay there, and in the morning we'll get everything taken care of." So the young man agrees to it, and they go to the guy's house, and the extra bed is actually in the basement. Okay, it's a little weird, but the guy was so tired and exhausted from everything that had happened. So he goes and lays down, passes out right away. He wakes up early morning and he hears giggling. He's like, "What the heck? Where is that coming from?" Kind of searches around the basement to see if he could figure this out. He ends up going into a room and he finds all these pictures, like disturbing pictures, and starts putting two and two together very quickly that this is where the missing children had been at some point. Like, this is how they're disappearing. He knows he needs to get the hell out of there, like now. So he goes to run up the stairs. As he gets to the stairwell, he sees a creepy-ass clown with his big smirky grin on his face standing in the stairwell, and kind of with that laugh that he had been hearing. So the clown's just standing there and has his clown laugh. So the guy does try to push past him. The clown knocks him out. He tumbles down the stairs and kind of lays there, and he can hear the clown slowly coming down the stairs toward him. And he knows he's in trouble. He has to get out of there.
Let's kind of tie that into the John Wayne Gacy story. So very, very similar, except that I think it happened like 20 years later, but same exact theme of the killer clown. And Gacy did the same thing where he actually lured boys over. And how he got caught was that he had a contractor go to his house, and he was missing. He was never seen again. And his mom reported him missing and said, like, Gacy was the last person to see him alive. Gacy denied it. And this kid was only 15 years old. So the police actually got a search warrant for the house, and in the basement, I don't recall, I think it was like he confessed to, I think, killing 36, basically kids. And yeah, that's a lot. And they believe that there was more, but he used to dress up as Pogo the Clown, and so now that's kind of where that fear of clowns really started to make its way to movies. They're super terrifying, is because of people like John Wayne Gacy.
Mm-hmm. Some clowns we all trusted so much. Well, we didn't, but
Yeah,
we
we
knew better
didn't.
by the time
No.
we were around. So I got a
Yes.
question for you.
Hmm.
What is more terrifying to you, clowns or dolls? Me too. I have
I'm not
always
gonna
thought
lie.
dolls were way scary.
When I was a kid, there was a creepy doll in my room. I never played with dolls. And there was this doll that was maybe like, I don't know, 2 feet tall, and that I was gifted when I was a kid. And I swear till this day,
Jeez.
she moved. She moved. And I remember the day my sister and I like were screaming, running out of the room. And mom was like, it was probably an earthquake or whatever. And it's like, no, she blinked her eyes. I don't know what the heck. So yeah, freaking hate dolls.
I freaking hate dolls.
I
I
just,
hate them so
yeah,
much.
no, no, no,
uh,
no.
that kind of ties into my next story. Now, this one is more folklore, I believe, and there's a couple different versions of books that have this similar story. They don't have the same name. But this is very relevant right now because there is like a remastered version of the movie Coraline that's coming out. And Coraline, for anybody that doesn't know, is a cartoon based movie. And I think it's horrifying. It's a girl with button eyes. So the story there was a mom, a daughter, and I think the dad had passed away. And the mom and the daughter, they ended up losing their house. They had to move, and they moved into like an older, broken down, kind of creepier house. And the girl, there was actually a wall in her room that I don't know if she was hearing noises, but for some reason she did cut out drywall to see what was behind this wall because I think she was hearing noises. And it was just a brick wall. The mom got so mad. Like, the mom was very abusive, especially once the dad had died. She was just very angry. She had no money. Like, life was tough. And she was just an angry lady. So, once the girl started questioning this brick wall and like what was going on with this whole, like, why was she hearing things behind it, the mom got so mad that she ended up beating this poor little girl to death. And then after a while, she started yelling at the girl, like, wake up, get up, I need you to open your eyes. And the girl didn't respond because she had died. And so the mom ended up sewing buttons on her eyes to make it appear like she did wake up because apparently she couldn't deal with what she had done. Days went by and a stench was coming from their house so bad that the neighbors started calling, started reporting it. And then they came in and found the poor, lifeless little girl with buttons sewn into her eyeballs. Creepy and gross.
Super creepy and gross, and since
people are messed up, even the people that come up with these stories.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked over the episodes how a lot of inspiration in some of the movies, they get taken sometimes to the extreme. Like, they're always the drama that they invoke in the movies. You really have to go to a dark place to do that, and yeah, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about one last case here that is making its way back into mainstream media. So we'll touch a little bit up on that. But have you heard, Jill, of the Zodiac Killer?
I have. My mom used to tell us about it, but I had seen the movie years ago.
Yeah. California has a lot of serial killers. There's like the Golden State Killer, and you have all these other names, but the Zodiac Killer started based off of Northern California. Actually all of California, but mostly the attention that the Zodiac Killer was getting was in Northern California. And the reason why this case is something that I've always remembered is because of the ciphers. So the way that he was also taunting the police. Do you recall that? What do you
I
think
do.
goes on in a person's mind to not only just taunt the police, but also send ciphers? Like, imagine the time and the psychology behind that person to sit there, and they didn't have a chat GPT back then to, come up with these ciphers. So this is like, this is
He
like
he
they
he clearly had some Rain Man qualities to him that
yeah,
yeah, to be able to do that. It is the
because
super special kind of messed up.
yeah, yeah. Because it blows my mind that they still haven't been able to decipher some of them, especially because clearly this fed his ego, and
Mhm.
he was enjoying this a lot. But he confessed in one of the ciphers that his name, that he already basically told them who he is in one of the
Mhm.
ciphers.
Hey,
So,
Mel, why don't we take a step back and explain kind of what the movie is about in a short little, or not
well,
the movie,
I mean,
not the movie, the
the
actual,
movie.
the actual story of what, like he picked up hitchhikers, didn't he?
Yeah, so there was in the late 60s he would pick up hitchhikers and then he would kill them and he would dress there were some people that did survive and this is how they were able to give some sort of description. But they believe a total of 37 people have been tied back to the Zodiac killer, but only 5 of them have been confirmed via the Zodiac killer, stating that he killed them.
Hmm.
But this was during a time where collecting DNA or things like that just wasn't a thing. So as of today, they haven't linked it to anyone with DNA or anything like that, but they believe 37 victims at least. And so via hitchhiking. Yeah.
That movie always stood out to me because I remember hitchhiking used to just be a thing. And
Mhm.
the family that I had nannied for, both of them used to hitchhike. Like the dad, he just recently told me, he said, yeah, before I had a car when I was in high school, when I was freshman, sophomore, I didn't have a car yet. And he said, I hated waiting for the bus because it would take so long to get home. He's like, I just stick my thumb up and hitchhike home. I'm like, what? He's like, that's what we did. We all did it. It was totally normal. It
Yeah.
wasn't anything bad. It was just how we got home. I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah.
it's just totally different time.
Oh,
But people like the Zodiac Killer sure put a stop to that.
absolutely. I mean, even today with something like Uber, right? There's been cases around that, even like people steal Uber people's cars and kidnap people. There's just so many ways around it. Even now, there's still loopholes and people get away with things like that. But it's definitely a lot safer now. No matter where you are, you can count on your phone being pinged. So
I
it's a lot harder.
I I never wanted to take an Uber in the early days. I was like terrified of it.
Mm,
And it was because I heard a story of an Uber driver picking up a young girl, like not a little girl. She was probably, either late teens, old enough to take an Uber. She was of age. Took an Uber. She might have been like early 20s. And she reached over and started stabbing the driver just because she wanted to see what it felt like to kill someone. And so
mm,
that just like right there, those messed up stories. I was like, no, thank
mm-hmm.
you. And yeah, it wasn't the Uber driver doing it to them, but it just scared me enough. And it wasn't until I went to work, we flew to somewhere, and I had to take an Uber. And I was like, by myself? Like, are you going to be at the airport when I get there? Can we take an Uber together? And I just kept, I hated it. Oh, and then we flew to Texas. I flew to Texas and I'm already like nervous about having to take this Uber from from by myself, right? So I go
Mm-hmm.
out I flew into, I don't know where, Dallas, I want to say. And I go out to where the Uber line is, and there's all these people, and we're waiting, and there's just this line of Ubers that are pulling up. And mine finally pulls up, right? I'm nervous. I'm already nervous. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's warm. I'm happy to be in Texas. And my Uber pulls up. This woman that worked at the airport that was directing traffic, she's like, stop. And she almost hits me in the chest, like to stop me. The guy already took my rolling suitcase. And he's starting to put it in the back of the car. And she's like, do not get in this man's car. And I was like, what? And she's like, do not get in this man's car. And she's like, sir, put the bag down. You need to leave right now. And I'm like, holy crap, what is happening? And so she made him leave, and she's like, go on the app and get another Uber. You're not getting in that car. And she's like, this is how people get killed or kidnapped or something. And I was like, what just happened? And so then when I saw the guy that lived in Texas that I worked with, he's like, yeah, most likely he just didn't have the correct airport sticker to be able to do Uber at the airport.
Go through there. Yeah, that's wild.
Asked the other Uber driver that I told the other Uber driver that story. He told me why. But yeah, I was like, oh my God, I'm already so scared. And now this just happened. But,
yeah. That's wild. That's crazy. Yeah, you really aren't safe. But back to the Zodiac Killer. So as of today, this year, maybe a month or two ago, there's this guy on TikTok, and you can just search it if you're interested. Just search for Zodiac Killer's grandson, and there's this guy who was also a police officer. He served in the military, and he is convinced that his grandfather was a Zodiac Killer, and he goes on these rants to connect the dots as to why, to include that his grandfather was a police officer, and how when he was interviewed, which you can see in the interviews of his grandfather, he was considered a suspect. And when he's describing the scene, it's almost like he's smiling about it, or he's just describing the scene. You would think that, well, who knows, right? Everybody's different. But he is describing the scene of this woman that was murdered. And the grandfather in the interview goes into detail of how he can see the bullet hole and her bra just moving up and down because of the breathing as she's dying. So he's like, almost like he's, taking in the details of what happened, as if, that's something that he was kind of like proud of. And so all these little things, the grandson is saying, this is why it was my grandfather. Not to mention that he gets some of the ciphers, and then some of the ciphers. So his grandfather's name was Richard. And so nickname for Richard is Dick. And in some of the ciphers, you could see where he would write Dick. Then he had letters of his grandfather, and the way he would write certain letters is this same exact writing as the ciphers that were sent to the newspapers. And so he got so much attention on TikTok that now they're working on a documentary to dig further into potentially solving the Zodiac Killer case. Yeah, super wild.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you said you've had a lot of serial killers and messed up people from California.
Yeah.
I was going to say that Wisconsin has produced a good number of them as well. Like I used to always say that, but I decided to Google it while we were talking there. And to my surprise, Wisconsin's not on the list at all. California is, but the number one is Alaska.
Interesting.
Yeah, and their number spiked in the 80s. I think a lot of serial killers were in the 80s.
I don't know what they were eating. Yeah, I don't know what they were eating, what they were listening to, but there's a lot of crazy stuff in the 80s that happened, to include some of like the cult stuff.
Yeah. So Alaska was number one, Nevada second.
I can see that.
For serial killers, though,
a lot happens in just en route to Vegas. A lot.
And then Florida is third, California was fourth, and then Washington, Oregon, Louisiana.
Oh, the whole entire West Coast, huh?
Well, not Florida, but yeah. Wow. There's just so much space out there that I think everybody thinks they could just dump somebody somewhere and get away with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of desert and a lot of woods. Yeah, that's wild.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Bigger Room podcast during the month of October and listening to our spooky episodes. We've had a lot of fun making them, for sure. Next week, we'll be back at it with more of mindset, business-related, entrepreneurship.
We really hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did, and we'll see you next week.